So welcome to Impact PHL Conversations, place-based gender lens investing, driving impact through local capital. We have three speakers who are here today, and we want to thank all of our sponsors that help us facilitate these types of calls where they are free to the general public and that people across the country are joining us together to learn. I just wanted to highlight, which many of you know, but maybe others this is new for, we host a summit every year. We are in the phase where we're about to launch the agenda. So if you would like to join us, we would love to have you with us. If you use ECO25, you get $600 off. And we have some really wonderful speakers this year talking about some primary ideas and looking at the issues within our general economy. So it's important. Also, I hope that many of you know Opt Impact. It's an Impact PHL initiative. It is for investors who are accredited to discover and connect with other investors, as well as opportunities that are fairly local and in the region. So if you haven't learned about it, please log on and see what's possible or connect with Dermot. We are all going to take an attendee poll. The speakers have asked for that poll as a way to kind of make sure that their conversation was going in the right direction as they're speaking. So I'm going to pull this poll up, and if each of you could give us a sense of the role that you hold in the world and your journey, that would be great. So I'm going to give you a moment or two to add to the poll. Great. I see we have most of our answers in the door. So I'll end the poll and share the results with you so that everybody can just see sort of where we are. Can you all see the general poll, hopefully, in terms of the roles that you hold, as well as the percentages in terms of where we are in our own pathways? So I'll stop sharing that. And I'll move into just introducing the speakers that we have today. Sana Kapadia, Audrey Selian, and Nimrit Kang will be speaking on this issue, and I'll turn it over to them as I begin to share the primary screen in that direction. So, Sana, I will hand it over to you and allow you to introduce Audrey and Nimrit.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Meg and Dermot and the whole team for having us here in this space today in what is a very important conversation, especially with everything that is happening around the world and of course in particular in the US. So I'm really grateful for you all holding this space for us to dive deep and eager to listen and learn from everybody. So my name is Sana Kapadia, and I've been working in the field of gender lens investing for the last decade and currently lead an endowment focused at the Gender and Climate Nexus called Heading for Change, which was founded by a friend and partner to many of us, Suzanne Beagle, who's also one of the pioneers of the movement to gender lens investing. So it's beautiful to bring Suzanne into this space too, because I'm sure she'd be very tickled by the dialogue. And today we have the pleasure to dive into a topic that's topical for many of us with two amazing leaders in this space. And we have Audrey Sellian and Nimrit Kang who are here. And we'll put their bios in the chat, so I won't get into too much detail. But I think what's really beautiful about both of them is that they've worked in on the institutional investor side as well as with family offices and really deep on the ground on the fund side. So they're bringing very different and diverse perspectives. So maybe just Audrey, maybe I'll come to you first for a little bit of an intro. Um, and maybe to kick us off, because again, please feel free to kind of say what you do in a sentence or two. But what I'd love to get us started on as we think about, what does it really mean to do place-based gender lens investing? And first of all, what does that mean? What does it really look like? What are some of the examples, etc.? And we're going to surface that in this conversation. But I'd love to start with the person here. And Audrey, if you can share a little bit of, yeah, your own journey, as well as was there any sort of defining moment that brought you to work in the field of gender lens investing? A little bit on your personal journey, and then Nimrit, the same for you. But Audrey, let's kick off with you.
Thank you so much, Sana. I hope everyone can hear me okay. Good. Okay. So it's a pleasure to be here with you all. I have been with Rianta Capital for approximately 18 years now. It's an advisory structure to a single family office. And we began, we didn't actually begin with a gender lens, to be honest. We began with a mandate to identify the most sustainable, mission-driven, scalable organizations we could find. And we were looking across a couple of sectors. And over the years, and now as we do every year, kind of portfolio level valuations, and we try to kind of aggregate information and look at the outcomes, well over 90% of our portfolio today is compliant to 2x kind of principles. So we've ended up, just by virtue of searching for quality and searching for scalability, investing in many women-led and women-serving teams. The journey's been very much one of experimentation and exploration. The roots of the family are in India, and so therefore the investing has been in India. And one of the things that we've had the privilege of just stumbling into really is, when you show up enough times to enough of the like seminal gatherings, much like Total Impact, is in Philly, you can't help. I mean, if you're a little bit outward oriented, you can't help but find your peers, and you will start to make those links and connections. And really, my goodness, if that hasn't been one of the most well, that's been seminal, that's been defining, because really since probably year 3 or 4 of the initial portfolio building exercise, every transaction has just by default been a co-investment. We absolutely must find our peers. We absolutely must kind of learn from each other and share, because when we began with just a couple of guidelines and keywords, it's overwhelming, especially and the market and the concentration of opportunities and pipeline was very different 20 years ago, 18, 20 years ago. And today, fortunately, there's a lot more, I think, coherence. There are narratives. There's the concept of place-based, the agglomerations, the ability to find those who are the active, like the community of practice. It's a little bit easier. today, I think. It's just you have to have that desire to look. And fortunately, that's been the defining part of this journey is really finding those others and ensuring that this is the road to impact and to the scalability of these businesses. It's also in us as we do the work that we do to to build that social capital and use our networks to be able to get into and find other people to work with us all along the life cycle of these entrepreneurial journeys. So I'll stop there, but I hope that's a decent start, Sana.
Thank you, Audrey, for getting us kicked off. And Nimrit, coming to you next. Oh, you're on mute.
That helps. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Sana, for moderating this panel. So I am with NorthStar, Chief Investment Officer. NorthStar is a firm that has a very rich history in socially responsible investing, rich and long history. We were founded by a community activist back in 1990. And one of the defining, it's interesting, the whole gender lens is such a multifaceted discussion for NorthStar because we have been predominantly been an all-female team, all-female investment team. And, you know, again, the firm was founded with a belief to create an organization where people, especially women from all different backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, racial backgrounds, have the opportunity to pursue fulfilling careers in financial services, right? And you know, it's easier said. Why does that matter? Because even today, less than 1% of the assets are managed by women managers, right? And I find that whole backlash against diversity interesting, but you know, there's a whole case for cognitive diversity, and that's what we're talking about here. But what brought me to this place is I've spent my entire career in traditional asset management. And at some point, you know, I just wanted to be able to marry my interest and passion in financial markets more with some of this purpose-led, mission-driven work. And also the opportunity to work with an all-female investment team is just such a rich and amazing opportunity. So that's kind of what drew me to this work. And just broadly speaking, so at NorthStar, you know, we straddle the entire spectrum of investments from public markets where we're using shareholder activism as our primary vehicle of impact, right? And even though this discussion is about place-based investing, I'll just say one point on public markets, and that's, you know, we really believe that you can exercise your rights as shareholders to make big impact. And a lot of the community, philanthropic community, tends to underestimate how powerful that is. As we're seeing right now, corporate America has is a big force of capital to move change, to affect change. And that's how we focus on or advocate for change using public markets. Coming on the private side, it's interesting because at NorthStar, we call these all the private catalytic investments, place-based investments. We actually call them outside investments. And the reason we call them outside is because we view them as sitting outside the traditional financial system. That means that unlike the public markets where we try to balance both the return and the impact, here on the private side or the place-based side, it's primarily about impact. And that's how we view that world. But that's just a brief introduction.
That's fantastic. Thank you both so much. I guess I'd like to maybe go back to first principle here and ask each of you, if someone were to ask you on this call, and actually for the rest of the room, I'm going to ask the same of you, how would you define place-based gender lens investing? Because that honestly also sounds like a mouthful. So yeah, I don't know, Audrey, Nimrit, which of you would like to share how you'd come to define it? And for others in the room as well, please, you know, put your hand up to share your definition of what that means for you. Audrey, Nimrit, who feels Nimrit? Looks like you might be.
Yeah, sure. Since I'm off mute, I can just keep going with that. We have defined these 5 pillars that we look at. That's race, gender, human rights, economic equity, and corporate governance. So everything that we look at, every investment is through that lens. How is this investment trying to address each of those 5 pillars? But the interesting part is there's such a huge intersectional component to that. You cannot talk about economic equity without talking about gender equity, right? Or racial equity. And all this intersection leads us almost always to look at opportunities which have high proportion of women, underserved women, women coming from, Black or brown communities, underserved in areas of persistent or high rates of poverty, so forth. That's how we think about place-based and gender investing. And actually, if I were to take it a little further, every investment is a place-based investment because it's happening at a place, right? Now,
Yeah.
we do it on the national level, ranging from all over the Northeast to the South to the West and here in Philly, which we're going to talk about later. So every investment is rooted in a community. And so, that's how we think about it, is that any private investment, catalytic investment, has a strong community component to it. Actually, it is the community component. And then place-based gets a special flavor, I would say a special nomenclature, just because a Philly foundation might be more interested in investments primarily for the Philadelphia region, whereas an organization in Boston is more or so focused in what's happening in the Northeast. But I don't know, Audrey, how you think about it.
I mean, in our case, I have to say it's been kind of, kind of backing into it rather than being very explicit about how we define place, because I mean, the mandate from the family office perspective was an entire country. And so go find sustainable organizations in India that have specific types of impact in agri, at the time, water and energy. And so that that
just that
has just that. And so it's taken, 17, 18 years to get to the point where we can actually have any kind of succinct sense of where are the clusters. And as it happens, we do have representation. More than half of the investment portfolio has occurred. There have been transactions that have occurred in 8 of the lowest income states of India. So for us, it's been that core criteria of really, I guess, trying to focus on like the additionality, understanding the additionality of our capital, the opportunity cost for us and for others, where we're coming in to places where everybody else is acting. Ideally, if it's a highly sought after, super crowded deal table, that's not where we're supposed to be. And so really, it again, not as strategic, I would say, and directed with clarity from the early days, but again, kind of working on a deductive basis and trying to find the places where our kind of capital actually does make a really big difference for entrepreneurial teams.
Yeah, and I think a common thread that you both raised was also just that intersectional approach that is innate, right? Like thinking about aspects of race and ethnicity, but also income and other forms of identity. I'm just curious, and I'm going to open the floor for anyone who has a different or similar definition as well of how they would define place-based gender lens investing. If you'd like to put your hand off or take yourself off mute, would love to hear from the room too. Still chewing on it and prefer to put it in chat, that's also good, but maybe we'll come back to that. So actually, maybe Audrey, I'll come to you next actually to ask then, could you bring your approach to life with an example of what maybe a most recent investment has looked like? Yeah, just to give us a flavor of what you thought you were setting out to do and where you guys are today, and an example of what an investment in practice looks like.
Sure. So I'll speak to one of our more recent investments in the last year. It was actually a secondary, a top up, an investment, a follow-on investment in a business that we first injected capital in, a very small amount of capital in 2013. And this is a business that produces compostable, biodegradable sanitary napkins and has had a very strong social impact component to it by virtue of its hybrid structure, by virtue of the social venture side, where purposely the goal was to take education and awareness building and the distribution of sanitary napkin packs 8 at a time at no cost to schoolgirls in rural areas so that they wouldn't miss a week of school a month. Um, so that kind of stuff can't sit on a balance sheet and make for a viable social enterprise investment when you're putting big equity in. But we saw how much of a heavy lift they had to make over the years in terms of really getting the product right. This is really about products. And so we also realized that in this instance, vertical integration of this kind of a business was really critical. You can't be beholden to vendors of varying quality all over the country, even if you are going in, tweaking the machines and using natural super absorbent polymers and fruit fibers. And, that whole process was so transaction cost intensive. What we did was we put in, we came in for, um, I'll, I'll just talk about the numbers. We came in for 50K in the context of a venture challenge and a matching fund. Today we're in for 1.8 million, where we've actually capitalized the entire production, the vertically integrated production unit and the machinery that is allowing the company to serve its clients with volumes that are actually finally at a reasonable place, at a decent threshold. So this business, just by virtue of the brand, the kind of direct to consumer, the brand. There's been a B2B component to this business. There's a huge social component to the business, and obviously, when you have you have a product that's biodegradable and compostable within 3 months, whereas 36 trillion pads a year end up in Indian landfills, it could be quite game changing. So, still early days, very risky business. But absolutely kind of focused in one of the geographic clusters where we have many other companies, and also entirely, women focused.
Mhm. Thank you so much, Audrey. And I can imagine in that example that you shared as well, there must be so many, thinking of place space, so many, I don't know where this region was, but India is such a diverse country as well. There's all these sort of underpinning cultural dynamics. So maybe one for us to come back to in a moment. But Nimrod, I'd love for you as well to give us an example in your portfolio.
Sure. One of the recent investments we've made or brought forward to our clients to make on their behalf is the Women's Community Revitalization Project here in Philadelphia. And what they do is they provide affordable housing for women and their families, especially low-income women with low-income occupations or the livelihood. The problem that WCRP is trying to solve is this. The average median income for the Philadelphia region is defined at 110,000 per year, right? But if you look just in Philadelphia, that's because of all the suburban area that's get counted in the Philadelphia region. But the average household income in proper Philadelphia city is more like $58,000. But even beyond that, a third of the city's population, or 200,000 households, are well below that level. They earn about 30,000. So how can they afford the rent that is set at the level for the 100,000 level? So WCRP, one of the big attractions for us is this is an organization It's run by a couple of women. They have been around since the 1990s. They renovated their first set of townhomes back in 1990 using the settlement funds that they got from Fidelity Bank. And they were able to rent it out to single women raising their families who needed this affordable housing as an anchor to go on and build livelihoods for themselves and provide stability for their families. They've been around for a long time. Over the last few years, they've partnered with the Community Land Trust to provide much more of a permanent base and offer an alternative. So as some of the renters are able to buy those apartments or townhomes, they can based on a long-term lease, very, very long-term lease from the Community Land Trust. So this is one of the investments. It checks a lot of boxes for us because first of all, based on our 5 pillars, it addresses not only the racial equity, the gender equity, but also economic equity, all 3, right? Based on who they're serving. The other big part for us, Sana, is just understanding. We use a philosophy called follow the money.
Mhm.
Often we want to understand how the capital that we're providing, how does it end up impacting the end customer or the end client, in this case, the homeowner or the renter, right? And what does that mean for them? And does that result in rents that are going to be affordable, well below the market rates for them to continue to have sustainable housing solution? That's how we're evaluating the process. We're also looking for an organization which is financially stable and sound, has a long history and track record, which they do. And we're also looking for where there's a very strong disciplined commitment to the mission and not a mission drift. Often we see organizations that start out small, are very committed to their mission, but as they're maybe successful in carrying on their mission, they attract more dollars, more funding, more grants, and that often leads to a mission creep, right? They end up expanding from here. They are servicing, for example, WCRP is very focused on making sure that their average renter has 30%, the lowest quartile of average median income, annual median income. But often we'll see them go up that scale because they're trying to expand their services. So WCRP has been very committed to their mission. That's what we like about that. And then finally, walking the talk, you look at the leadership, they come from the communities that they serve. Their board comes from the communities that they serve, and that's really important to us.
Thank you so much. And, just thinking about with the examples that you both shared, there's some key components, right? There's this aspect of really being designed with and for community from the start, more collaborative, and of course, intersectional approaches to that local knowledge aspect and really creating things that are more fit for purpose, right? What's needed, as you said, Nimrat, with your example, there are these different income buckets, but without knowing that in the first place, how can you design solutions that actually help people where it's actually needed? So some interesting components coming up there. Maybe Nimrat, to stick with you a little bit, I'm curious if you can share also some of the tools that you've used that sort of help you find such opportunities or other things in your process that have been supportive.
This one particularly came through the Opt Impact network that we just talked about before. I think Meg highlighted it. And Dermot's a key person behind that as well. So just being on the mailing list for Impact Philly, saw some of the investments that they were highlighting through the Opt Impact platform. That just the description was interesting enough to us. Long-term history, raising capital, affordable housing, aimed at women in underserved areas in Philadelphia. That inspired us, our team, to start doing the due diligence. And then the due diligence is about having the calls with the team, WCRP team, digging in more, digging into the financials, the history, all of that due diligence, the proper due diligence, and coming full circle to deciding to go forward with the investment. So that's the very narrow answer. The broader answer is, of course, there are platforms like OptImpact to look at, what's available in Philly, what are some of the other opportunities, but then also on national scale, looking at other ideas and other organizations that are doing similar work across the nation. For example, for the CDFIs, we look at OFN, the Opportunity Finance Network is another area to look at, but just a lot of different tools and platforms and networks like that. A lot of ideas also come by collaboration and talking and networking with peers. So that's a big part of it. Again, a plug for the Philly Impact Philly conference in May, right? You really, I mean, the number of ideas that I and my team picks up just by attending conferences, talking with others, understanding what people are looking at is very, very helpful as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, so much of this is why community matters, even more so in these times. And Meg, I'm sure if people want more info on that tool, we can also share. That would be great. Audrey, maybe coming to you first. Yeah, some of the tools and processes that you've leveraged, and I'm happy, if helpful, to share also from the Heading for Change perspective, but go for it, Audrey, first.
Thank you. I mean, I guess we will all have experienced on some level the power of networks, the ability to like reach out to connect with not only the like-minded peers, but the folks who are doing exactly the same stuff we are in parallel. And so I mean, I can speak to having been involved in kind of the place-based networks. And I keep giving examples about, kind of India-focused place-based, where we're very active with the India Impact Investors Council, other local smaller groups, notably family office circles and groups. Of course, the larger the conveners that bring so many of us together that we all know. So I won't state all the usual suspects, but really, I mean, to be able to kind of get the rubber to hit the road and to focus on ensuring that the visibility and the discoverability of the opportunities that we're working on, that our peers are working on, can't be left to a chance conversation or a chance catch up, or who you happen to sit next to at the conference or catch up with. That was very much the reason why the architectures that we use in the context of India, it was the Artha India platform. This is a kind of inception of the tool, which was just very simply there to create standardized, robust profiling of the opportunities that would actually be contextualized by who is looking at them or where they're coming from. And I mean, it's been a journey, and it's an imperfect journey. So there's always going to be overlaps, and there's going to be difficulties in ensuring that the information you're getting, the data you're getting, is as fresh as it can be. There's always going to be these challenges, but fundamentally, to be able to go to a place and be able to see, like OptImpact, to be able to see what's listed where, who's offering what right now, who's actually got a process underway just on the diligence. We don't actually have to focus on much more than that in terms of the necessary execution. Even that part is already very challenging. And so, I mean, so we've used Artha India in the past. In the context of Philly, we actually, by chance, have happened to play a role in supporting Impact PHL to getting operational. And it's part of what we're working on together with Heading for Change as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And just quickly on Heading for Change, this is one of the partnerships we're really excited about in terms of the pipeline aspect, being able to feature the funds that we invest in, as well as the broader pipeline with Audrey and her team. And that could also be one of the tools. I wouldn't say we're defining it as place-based gender lens investing, but of course, these are like they go deep in certain regions, and the things that we look for are more, again, local proximate approaches. So, Audrey, we can definitely share more with this group as well. I see a question that's coming through on data and measurement. So I want to make space for that. But so on maybe on that thread, I'll ask each of you, like, how are you measuring the impact of these types of investments that you're making? And is there a go-to set of metrics or standards that you go to do that?
Maybe I can start. So there are standard metrics that you can look at an impact, right? You can definitely look at the lives impacted, the dollars that have been put to place, depending on be it affordable housing units or the lives impacted. There's so many different metrics, standard metrics that you can look at, and we do look at them. But it also depends. Every investment is going to have its specific metrics based on the impact that they're looking to achieve. So in the case of WCRP, for example, the basic underlying premise is that affordable home ownership or affordable housing is going to translate into stability, job stability, income stability, family stability. So one of the metrics that they like to lean on is to show what's the increase in median income after a renter has been in those units for about 4 years. And that's a 57% or so increase that they show. So those are some of the metrics that organization shows. So I would say there's a mix. There's always a mix between the metrics that we like to see, both on the financial aspect, what's their financial stability from the percentage of revenue they're getting from grants versus other places, all those metrics. On the impact, of course, there's related to the community served, the lives impacted, and then there's a mixture of very idiosyncratic or specific metrics that each organization will like to showcase based on what their initial hypothesis is for impact.
Thank you, Nimit, for getting us kicked off. And I think, yeah, that tends to be the approach, right? Like there are some things that are specific and some that are broader. And how do we bring these to, and also in a way that's not very onerous for our investees. Audrey, do you want to share a little bit of your approach too on the impact
Yes,
measurement side?
sure. And I'd love to hear from others in the room too, their views, their experiences. Ours has been, yeah, kind of like everything else, kind of an iterative experimental journey, where despite knowing that there have been great efforts underway to establish taxonomies and sort of frameworks and so on, we, as a private family office investor, really been just beholden to kind of the wishes and priorities of the funder and the family. One of our kind of early discoveries just in the process of interacting with the entrepreneurs was anytime you try to over-engineer this piece of it, you end up getting nothing. So what we focused on in the due diligence process with many of our companies was really trying to understand just first and foremost, what do you naturally track anyway? And to understand what is it, what obviously the first point of entry is understanding why are you on this mission? What is it in this mission, and what is it about your own story that where things coalesce? And it's really there where we began to uncover that usually it's possible to boil this down and to enshrine it in terms and in shareholder agreements in a very reasonable way, boil this down to, two or three really practical, operationally realistic and viable metrics to track. Because, and this was And I think that the levels of sophistication in terms of the companies and the entrepreneurs has evolved tremendously. It's very different today. But every time we tried to bring in something that came from, you know, something external to the actual management team, we found that, it was always just kind of patchy, and you could tell that we were exerting a sort of level of cognitive pain on the management team. So I guess that's not really squarely answering the question. I'm talking more about process, I guess. But that has informed how we try to track the metrics.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that
ultimately,
makes sense.
we're looking at human well-being outcomes. So we're trying to broaden that umbrella and to just be as patient as possible with how the objective indicators support our sense of those
Yeah.
outcomes.
Thank you, Audrey. Well, we have a lot of beautiful and rich questions. So I'm going to maybe ask each of you. We've been in the realm of possibility and opportunity and all the beautiful things, but I also wanted to name that doing this work in this moment has gotten harder with all the backlash. And maybe just if each of you could take just a moment before we switch to audience questions, and then we'll end on a high note, I promise. Is to ask, like, what is worrying you about some of, doing this work in this moment? Like when words like gender, women, climate, impact, apparently they're all banned. So yeah, what's keeping you up at night as it relates to doing this work? Just to put it out. And others in the group, please do share as well. It's not just for us speakers.
Yeah, I think there's no shortage of things that are worrying at the moment, as you can imagine. It's getting beyond the anger, despair, the helplessness, right? I think the big thing that we're focused on is what are we doing? Why are we doing it? And we don't want to get very fear oriented or start making decisions based out of fear, right? Which I see a lot going around, and fear kind of takes a life of its own at some point. I think what we have to come back to is there, one of the examples that I talked about, affordable housing, the same for affordable childcare. There are organizations that are doing that. There are other organizations that are, involved in regenerative agriculture, for example. So there's a whole spectrum of that, and they're all facing some kind of suffering from backlash, Doge cuts. There's no lack of pain that's being felt in this space right now. The question is, what are we going to do about it? And what we're coming to is this is a time for at least this community, the values-based community, the mission-aligned community, to come together, collaborate more, join forces, and have, really move forward in solidarity, right? So this community's always been known for collaborating, from learning from each other. Now the need is even more, and some examples I'll share with you is even we're doing this, but even from what I've heard from some of the organizations that we invest in, they're coming together with other organizations to offer maybe support in terms of legal help for their grantee partners. So it's all the way that's kind of coming through. And on our side, what we're trying to do, especially related to these private catalytic investments, is amplifying the need in front of our clients, right? So it's like, if you had to make so many of our clients are looking and motivated by impact, desire to make impact. And right now, you have to meet the moment. Right now, the need is so intense for these organizations, foundations to step up and meet the moment, right? And that's the message that we're leading with.
Thank you, Nimit, for getting us kicked off on that. So maybe what I'll start to do is, just given the rich questions that we're getting, Audrey, I'd love to come to you with this one, because there's two questions that are kind of around more at a, I guess, top level of, like, what is the role of something like gender lens investing? And do we think that gender lens investing involves lifting women up, or rather a belief that women investing in women generates more financial outcomes, right? And maybe if you can share in your experience what you've seen. Yeah, let's start with that one for you, Audrey.
Um, so, I mean, fundamentally, we're looking at identifying interventions, products or services that are going to make life better and generate incomes and livelihoods. It is so heartbreaking to see what kind of the devolution and like the semantic warfare that's underway right now, that's been referenced already. It is heartbreaking. But all I can think, I mean, and I remember this expression, there's nothing so whole as a broken heart. Like, all I can think is if we need to change our vocabulary, we will change our freaking vocabulary and we will focus on ensuring that the outputs are still achievable. And I mean, one can invest. I mean, of course, it helps to have a defined and cohesive mission to lift and empower, of course. But we're fundamentally, if we're looking at the modality of that as we're going to do it through this product, this service, this platform, this many, this number of people whose incomes are augmented or improved. I mean, I think it comes down to just keeping your eye on those operational priorities, determining what it is and what kind of money is going to be able to best support those outcomes. And if we need to change our vocab, we'll change our bloody vocab. We can do that. It doesn't change the outcome. And so I just think that fortunately we're part of a community where there's a pragmatism and a conviction. And those two things together, I think will align very well as we move forward. I don't think I answered your question though, Sana.
All good, Audrey. And which frankly we could spend a whole lot of time on, Diane, in terms of the messaging that needs to be more compelling, but maybe also just to respond to that. I think that for the last 15 years, if not more, we have made the case on gender lens investing in so many ways, whether it is this IFC study that shows how gender diverse teams have a 20% higher net IRR, or this Vanguard study of maybe 2,600 companies again that shows the benefits of gender diverse teams. I've never seen a study or research that talks about the flip side. What does it mean, to Nimrod's point, to have a non-diverse team, and a place that's doesn't necessarily have the cognitive or other levels of it? And so we need to also see in what ways we can, the XXX. Thank you so much for pointing out that book. So there's lots of material out there. I do agree with Audrey in this moment. There's more to be done around our narrative, but one that we have to collectively work through. So I'm going to keep going with these wonderful questions, and hopefully we'll try and get in as many as possible. I'm curious, actually, and not just again for our speakers, but do you find that female-led businesses are just better suited for alternative investment forms? I have opinions, but I'd love to hear others.
You can say we're biased, we would say yes. And the reason is, one of the things that we note a lot is just the amount of, and maybe it's not just related to it's the type of individuals that are attracted to this work, right? And what they put in terms of the commitment. That's what's the commitment, and a very inclusive culture, getting everybody on board. It's that whole piece, rather than just having female lead the organization. I think it's the whole package. It's beyond just the face. it's everything that goes into place that makes it to be a much suitable place. It's the long-term thinking. It's thinking through cycles. I was just talking to an organization, female-led, and we were talking about what impact from some of the actions we have seen come out of the White House. And one of the things that this woman said to me is, we've been around 40 years, we've managed the down cycles, we're always very cautious, we make sure that we never bet the farm, right? All those things. We want to make sure that there's enough reserves in there to fight another day, to live to fight another day. And it's that type of a thinking. Now it does end up that it is a women-led organization, all that. But I think it's the whole package that leads to better suitability for those long-term type of models.
I'll just add that, I mean, there are a lot of things that we've learned from the venture capital paradigm. And although I strongly oppose putting it on a pedestal and holding it up as the model by which all capital should be allocated, what we've learned is, that there are ways to take risk and there are the right questions to ask. But what is so intrinsic and unique about the kinds of businesses we're talking about in these gender lens applications is looking at that inherent equilibrium. There's a balance. It's that package. It's exactly what Nimrit's talking about. It's that package in terms of planning projections, looking at cash flows, looking at margins. I mean, it's the whole, it's a mindset, it's the long-termism, and that's where I think, the VC model in some ways, as much as we may take its pearls, we have to discard certain elements of it that notably, shorten time cycles to 24 months, that look at, outlandish growth for the sake of it, at any cost, and all those obvious things that everybody will already have opinions on here.
Yeah, I mean, I also think that there's an interesting point here for me about the developed and emerging market context and what we see also in emerging markets around use of other types of instruments, more revenue-based, impact-linked funding, etc. And so there might be a moment for even more cross-pollination across geographies. There is a question, Audrey, on blended capital, and just speaking about that package approach that you mentioned, I'm curious, what your take would be on the role of more blended capital to advance these types of solutions.
So there's a lot of there's so many narratives on what blending means, and to my mind, I'm sure there's a whole complex kind of side of this when you're looking at multiple players, looking at, integrating different interests and different shareholder agreements and looking at term sheets and ensuring that, different layers are capitalized by different. For me, blending can happen over a 5-year period. We're very happy to support, whether it's taking a different position on liquidity preference, whether it's looking at a different view on, tag along rights, or, looking at valuation. We're trying to bring in others. And so for me, the blending piece of this, which is strengthened always when the underlying structure has the ability to absorb different kinds of money. And you can always find the fiscal sponsors to help with that. Now they're also more visible, thank goodness. It's looking at helping the company and the team build the rationale for how the different kinds of money are, what's the use of funds? Why is this needed right now? Why is it appropriate? And why sometimes it makes a lot of sense to put a tactical grant into a social business, which is absolutely for profit, because it's going to unlock X, Y, and Z. So for me, the modalities and mechanics of blending, I'm sure there are others who have much more technical approaches to this and who will be able to add much more, but it's just trying to widen that net and make that discovery as easy as possible for our peers.
Thank you, Audrey. I know that there were a few. So the question on narrative, I really wish we had another hour to spend on that because I think there's lots for us to unpack. Just maybe to address the last one in terms of the way that smaller scale investors or more alternative approaches and want to give I think, Margaret, you mentioned in the chat the work that you're doing with Invest for Better and bringing these circles together to really help also build capacity. I think earlier this month, Tracy Gray and We Are Enough launched this beautiful campaign, the 333, to really sort of mobilize $3 billion by 2033, if I'm not mistaken, from women across the world. And so there's all of these beautiful campaigns as well out there. So happy to share. Maybe Nimrod and Audrey, last sentence, like what, let me see. What are you most excited about to take in this moment to take this work forward? Like, what's giving you hope, rather, as you think about this work? Each of you, just a final statement.
Nimrod, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. I think that, what gives me a lot of inspiration and hope, I think it goes back to all the things that we've talked about. Audrey talked about this. The outcomes, they're much needed. When we talk to so many of the organizations that we have invested in, they represent people across the political spectrum, and there's real need in rural communities, in underserved communities, people of all color background, and our work is really important. It doesn't matter, what we are hearing on a day-to-day basis. The people that are impacted, the pain is real, our work is real, it's much needed. And we're not alone in this. I mean, as you can see, just in this one, I've been through in so many where there's a real commitment. One of the things that I'm hearing from some of our clients is they were kind of sitting on the fence. They wanted to move in this direction, be more mission aligned, be able to make more of these catalytic investments, but they were not fully sure or not being able to cross that bridge for whatever reason. And now they feel more motivated than ever. And we're hearing more and more of those calls. And it's really on us to make sure that we can avail of that moment, the opportunity, and be that bridge between, the investors or the funders and the organizations that really need those funds.
Right. Also acknowledging we're at time, so if you do have to jump, please do. Sorry for jumping over a bit, but Audrey, last word from you.
I'll be super quick. I'll just say what's giving me like just hope and inspiration. It's the buzz, the energy of what's going on in different places, in different cities where it's that much more visible. Like what Impact PHL has done with Opt is incredible. And now as other initiatives are bubbling up, just because there's like, an amazing person who happens to be on this call in Baltimore who's like bringing people together. Like, I think that's where it's at. It's folks who are, who are the natural conveners who just bring their gifts and start to make some of this stuff really visible and sitting in one place for the benefit of everyone. So I think that for me is the most hopeful thing.
Thank you so much. All right. Thank you all for listening.